He stood on my doorstep yesterday. The same man who once swore he'd never look back. But this time, my dear, it was me who didn't open the door. I can still see his shadow through the lace curtain. Trembling hands clutching a bouquet that looked far too young for his tired face. For a moment, the world went silent. The grandfather clock froze mid-tick. The kettle forgot to whistle, and my heart, well, it remembered every beat it had ever lost for him. Funny, isn't it? How time heals nothing. It only teaches you how to live with the ache. My name is Ruth. Most people in this little town know me as the old woman at the edge of Maple Street, the one with the ivy-covered house and the whispering garden. But once upon a time, I was someone's everything. I was his Ruth, the girl he promised forever to, before forever found someone wealthier. That day, when he left, still lives in the corners of my mind like a ghost that refuses to leave. I never told anyone the full story, not even my children. But tonight, as the rain brushes against my window and my tea grows cold beside me, I think it's time. So sit with me a while, my dear. Listen, before my old voice fades into the wind. Before I begin, if this story touches your heart even a little, do subscribe and stay with me till the end. It means more to me than you'll ever know. Now, let me take you back. It was 1964, the year of satin gloves, soft jazz, and heartbreak disguised as elegance. I was 24, working at a small bakery in town. Every morning smelled of butter and freshly baked bread, the kind of warmth that makes you believe life will always be kind. And then he walked in. Henry Whitmore. He wasn't from our town. You could tell by his coat. Too fine, too clean, for our muddy little streets. But what caught me wasn't his charm. It was the way he looked at everything like he'd seen it all before, and was still disappointed. He came every morning after that. Always the same order. Black coffee, 1 croissant, and a small smile meant only for me. I pretended not to notice, but my hands would tremble every time I served him. It wasn't love at first sight. It was quieter than that, a slow unfolding. He spoke about dreams, of opening a business, of traveling, of buying a house by the sea. And I spoke about bread, my father's garden, and the tiny life I thought was enough. But to him, enough was never enough. One rainier evening, after months of stolen glances and slow confessions, he kissed me behind the bakery. It was the kind of kiss that promises everything but tells you nothing, and I believed every lie hidden inside it. We married 2 years later. The town said I was lucky, that I'd found myself a man who dreamed bigger than our little world. But dreams can be cruel, my dear. They can make a man forget who held his hand before the applause started. When Henry met Clara Van Dorn, the daughter of a wealthy businessman from London, I didn't even see it coming. I was busy mending the hem of his suit for a dinner I wasn't invited to. He came home late that night, his scent different, his silence heavier. And when he finally spoke, his words were colder than the rain outside. "Ruth, I've been offered a new life," he said, "and I can't say no." That's how he left. No fight, no tears, just a note, a suitcase, and a silence that still hasn't left this house. I remember scrubbing the kitchen floor that night, not because it was dirty, but because grief needed somewhere to go. For years I lived with the echo of his footsteps. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of the candle, sounded like him coming home. But he never did, at least, not until yesterday. Now I live quietly. The ivy outside my window grows thicker each year, as if trying to hide the house from the past. I keep the same furniture, the same curtains, even the same cracked teacup he once said was too old to use. Maybe I keep it because it's the only thing that stayed. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks of me, if luxury ever feels lonely. I imagine him sitting in some golden room, surrounded by strangers who only love his name, not his soul. And then, yesterday proved me right when I saw him standing there, older, thinner, eyes begging for something he couldn't name. I didn't rush to the door. I didn't cry. I just watched. It wasn't cruelty. It was peace, the kind you earn after decades of holding your own heart together. He knocked again. "Ruth," he called. "Please, I just want to talk." But what could he possibly say? That Clara's wealth couldn't buy happiness. That time had been unkind. That he missed me. I made myself another cup of tea and whispered softly, "You should have thought of that before you left." Still, part of me trembled, because forgiveness is harder than hate. And love, real love, never truly dies. It just changes shape. Oh, my dear, tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who broke your heart? I'd love to hear your story, too, because as I sit here tonight, listening to the rain whisper my name, I realize this isn't the end. This is just the beginning of the reckoning. Henry's return wasn't coincidence. No, there's something he wants, something he's hiding, and my heart, foolish, stubborn thing that it is, still wants to know why. He stood there long after the knocking stopped. I could hear him breathing, that uneven, tired sound that used to calm me once. But this time, it didn't sound like a man asking for forgiveness. It sounded like someone running out of time. Waited, frozen in my armchair, the fire dying beside me. The clock struck 11, and still he stayed. Then, at last, the sound of retreating footsteps, slow, defeated, drifted through the mist. You'd think I'd feel satisfied, vindicated perhaps. But instead, my heart sank. There's something terribly lonely about realizing that the person who hurt you most is now just old. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face from years ago. Young, laughing, full of promise. And then I'd see Clara, the woman he left me for. Her beauty sharp as glass, her pearls shining brighter than my wedding ring ever did. I had hated her once, but hatred is a luxury the lonely can't afford. So I got up, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and wandered into the kitchen, the same kitchen where he used to sit on Sunday mornings, reading the paper while I kneaded dough, the same place where he told me he was leaving. It's strange how rooms remember. As I lit the old lamp, I noticed something on the floor. A folded envelope slipped halfway under the door. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "Ruth," it said, in his handwriting. For a moment, my knees nearly gave way. It had been decades since I'd seen those letters, that familiar curve of the R. I took a deep breath and opened it. "My dearest Ruth, if you are reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to face you. I deserve that. But please, hear me out. I made a mistake, a terrible one. I thought money could fill the spaces where love once lived. I was wrong. Clara is gone now. She passed 3 months ago. I don't ask for sympathy, only a chance to see you, even from a distance. I've come home, Ruth, but this time I have nothing to offer except the truth. Henry, the truth." He said it like it was something new. I folded the letter slowly, pressing it to my chest. I didn't cry. I had shed all my tears years ago, the kind that burn and salt your skin. But still, my heart ached, because even after all this time, a part of me still wanted to believe him. Morning came grey and silent. The fog wrapped the house like an old shawl, and the garden looked like it was holding its breath. I made tea, poured it into the chipped cup, the one he hated, and sat by the window, watching the world stir awake. And then, there he was, standing by the gate again. This time I didn't hide. I opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking like old bones. He turned at the sound, and for a second, the years vanished. But what I saw broke something inside me. His once dark hair was now silver and thin, his proud shoulders bent under invisible weight. His eyes, those same blue eyes that once promised forever, were tired, watery, and full of something I couldn't quite name. "Ruth," he whispered, voice trembling. "You look just the same." That was a lie, of course. Time had carved its story across my face, but maybe, to him, guilt had frozen me in his memory. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside, silently inviting him in. He hesitated before crossing the threshold, as if afraid the house itself might reject him. And maybe, in a way, it did. The air grew colder. The floorboards groaned beneath his feet, and every portrait on the wall seemed to watch him. He stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The furniture, the curtains, the faint scent of lavender that lingered from the past. "You kept everything," he said softly. "I didn't keep it for you," I replied. A long silence followed. Finally he spoke again. "Clara's gone," he said, voice barely audible. "She was ill for years. Cancer." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He looked around again, eyes glistening. "I shouldn't have come, I know that. But after she passed, I realized there's only one person who ever truly loved me." He looked at me then, really looked, as if searching for that girl from the bakery hidden behind my wrinkles. And, for a moment, I wanted to say his name, the way I used to, softly, lovingly, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Why now, Henry? Why after all these years?" He sighed. "Because I'm dying too, Ruth." The words fell between us, like a gust of cold wind. I felt my breath catch, the teacup trembling in my hand. He smiled faintly, almost apologetically. "The doctors said it's too late. I don't have much time left. And before I go, I just needed to see you, to know if you ever forgave me." Forgiveness. Such a heavy word. I looked at him, the man who had once been my world, then my wound. And suddenly, I didn't see the man who left me for luxury. I saw the boy who held my hand in the rain, who whispered promises under the bakery awning, who once dreamt of a life by the sea. He wasn't my enemy. He was my unfinished story. I sat down and gestured for him to do the same. He hesitated, then lowered himself into the armchair across from mine, the same chair he used to read in. The silence between us was no longer bitter, just old. "I didn't come to hurt you," he said after a while. "I came because you're the only piece of my life that ever felt real." I closed my eyes. "And what about the years you left me to wonder why? The nights I cried alone, the life I had to rebuild without you." He bowed his head. "I can't undo them. I wish I could." The fire crackled softly between us, its glow flickering across his face. For a brief moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself. Two old souls sitting amidst the ruins of what once was love. He stayed for tea. We spoke of small things. The weather, the town, the bakery that was now a coffee shop run by strangers. Every now and then, our eyes would meet, and a lifetime of words would pass unspoken. When he left that afternoon, he didn't ask to come back. He simply said, "Thank you, Ruth, for letting me be in your presence again." And then, as he walked down the cobblestone path, he turned once more and smiled. Not the confident smile of youth, but a gentle, grateful one. The kind that says, "I know I don't deserve this grace, but thank you for giving it anyway." As the gate clicked shut, a strange peace settled over me. Maybe that's what forgiveness feels like. Not fireworks, not tears, just quiet acceptance that the past is finally done trying to hurt you. That night, I slept without dreams. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. When I stepped outside to water the roses, I saw something glinting on the garden bench, a small wooden box, weathered, old, tied with a faded blue ribbon. My name was written on it. Inside was a locket. My locket, the one I'd lost decades ago, the one he had bought for me when we first fell in love, and beneath it, another letter. Ruth, you once told me that forgiveness is like planting a seed. It takes time to bloom. I never gave it the chance. But you did, even without knowing it. Thank you for letting me see the woman who loved me more than I ever deserved. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't grieve. I'm finally at peace. If there's a heaven, I hope they let me watch over you one last time. Henry, my hands shook as I read the last line. He had gone quietly. No drama, no pleading. Just as he had left all those years ago. Except this time, with humility instead of pride. I pressed the locket to my heart, and tears finally came, not of sorrow, but of release. Because in that moment, I realized he didn't return for redemption. He returned so I could be free. And for the first time in years, I truly was. My dear, if you're still listening, tell me, have you ever held on to pain for too long? Sometimes forgiveness isn't for them, it's for us, so that our hearts can finally rest. If this story touched you even a little, do subscribe and stay with me till the end. I have more memories, more lessons time has whispered into my soul, but for tonight, I'll leave you with this. Love doesn't die when someone leaves. It dies when we stop believing we deserved it in the first place. And I believe now, I always did. It's strange, my dear. When someone dies, they don't really disappear. Their absence fills the air. Their memory lingers in the dust that floats through the light. And their voice? Oh, their voice lives inside the quietest corners of your mind. Henry was gone again, but not like before. This time there was no betrayal, no storm, just silence. And that somehow hurt more. The days after his passing moved like fog, soft, shapeless, and slow. I found myself listening for footsteps that would never come again, glancing at the armchair that now sat too empty. You see, I hadn't planned on feeling anything for him again. But grief, my dear, is a tricky companion. It comes dressed as peace, and then breaks your heart all over again. It was 2 weeks later when the first letter arrived. No name on the envelope, just my address, written in a hand that wasn't his. Inside was a short note and a key. Mrs. Ruth Whitmore, Henry wished for you to have this. It unlocks the drawer of his writing desk. There's something he wanted you to see. EMI stared at the key, its metal cold against my palm. For a moment, I thought about throwing it away. I'd had enough of unlocking old wounds, but curiosity, my lifelong curse, got the better of me. That afternoon, I took a bus to the small rented cottage where Henry had spent his final months. It was a plain, quiet place, the kind of home you choose when you no longer expect visitors. The door creaked open easily. Inside, everything was neat, too neat. The air smelled faintly of cedar and medicine. And there, in the corner by the window, was his desk. Old oak, polished, waiting. The key fit perfectly. Inside the drawer, I found a stack of letters, each sealed, each addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened the first one. Ruth, I wanted to write before I came to you, but I didn't know where to start. Every word felt too small for what I owed you. But if you're reading this, I need you to know something that may change the way you remember everything. Clara didn't steal me from you. She saved me. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. He continued, the night I left, I wasn't chasing her wealth. I was running from a truth that would have broken you. Your father, the man who adored you, had borrowed money from her family's companies, a large sum, and when he couldn't repay it, Clara's father threatened to have him imprisoned. I couldn't let that happen. I thought if I married her, they'd forgive the debt, and they did. You never knew because I couldn't bear to tell you. I thought it would ruin you to learn what your father had done. So I became the villain instead. I had to sit down. My knees gave way beneath the weight of it. All those years I had hated him, cursed him, and he had been protecting me. Tears blurred my vision as I read on. Clara knew, of course. She never loved me, not truly, but she pitied me. We lived in comfort, but I was a ghost there. Every room smelled of perfume and silence. I wanted to write you, to tell you everything, but guilt kept my hand still. And then, when I heard your father had passed, I thought, it was too late. You deserved a better life, not a man built on lies. If forgiveness ever found me in this lifetime, it would be through your heart, Ruth. That's why I came back, not to be loved again, but to tell you what I should have said 40 years ago. My tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. How cruel life is, to make us wait a lifetime to hear the truth. I sat in that room for hours, reading letter after letter, each one more tender, more broken than the last. Some were written decades ago, never sent. Others were recent, shaky handwriting, weak hands, but full of longing, and in every single one, he signed the same way, forever yours, even when I wasn't allowed to be. Henry. I came home before dusk. The cottage felt like it had exhaled something I'd been holding in for years. When I stepped back into my little house, it felt different too, lighter. I placed the letters in the wooden box he'd left me and sat quietly by the window. You know, I used to think forgiveness was a gift you gave to someone else. But that night, I realized it's also the key to setting your own soul free. I whispered his name softly into the quiet, Henry, and for the first time since I was 24, it didn't hurt to say it. Days turned into weeks. The roses in the garden began to bloom again. Brighter, almost proudly. I started baking again too, though just for myself. It's funny how the smell of bread still makes me feel 20 years younger. Sometimes I'd talk to him as if he was still here. Oh, Henry, I'd say, you never did learn to tie a proper knot on the flour bag. Or, you'd laugh if you saw how terrible I still am at crosswords. And sometimes, I swear, I could hear his chuckle in the creak of the floorboards. But one morning, something happened that shook me again. A knock on the door. I opened it, expecting the postman. But it was a young woman, mid-30s maybe, pale, elegant, eyes just like Henry's. Are you Mrs. Ruth Whitmore? She asked, voice gentle. Yes, I said slowly. She smiled sadly. I'm Margaret, Henry and Clara's daughter. My breath caught. I had known they'd had a child, but I never imagined she'd find me. May I come in? She asked. I nodded, stepping aside. She looked around the house quietly, her eyes soft with recognition. He used to talk about this place, she whispered. Said it was the only home that ever felt real. We sat at the table, the same table where I'd once waited for him to come home. She reached into her bag and placed a small velvet pouch in front of me. He wanted you to have this. It's his wedding ring. He said it never belonged anywhere else. I opened the pouch slowly. Inside was the gold band. Worn, scratched, but still glinting faintly. I traced the engraving. Inside, H and R, always. My eyes filled again. He kept it all these years. She nodded. Even after he married my mother, he said he couldn't throw away the only part of his life that was honest. And then she said something I'll never forget. He told me to tell you that you were his peace. My dear, have you ever had someone call you their peace? It's the gentlest kind of love. The kind that survives even after the fire burns out. When she left, I sat alone again, the ring warm in my palm, and for the first time, I felt no sadness, just gratitude. Because love, the real kind, doesn't always end in marriage or forever. Sometimes it ends in understanding. That night, as I lit a candle beside his locket and the box of letters, I whispered, "You kept your promise, Henry. You came home." And outside, the wind moved softly through the roses, almost like applause. Before I continue, my dear, if you're still with me, thank you. If this story has touched even a corner of your heart, do subscribe and stay with me through the rest of it. We've only just begun to unfold what truly lived behind those quiet years, because there's something still hidden, something neither Henry nor Clara ever told me, and soon I would find it. For days after Margaret's visit, I moved through the house as if in a dream. Everything felt strangely complete, as if the story had finally ended the way it was meant to. But life has a way of saving one truth for last. The one that changes everything you thought you knew. It was a Thursday morning, the kind that smells faintly of rain and old wood. I was dusting the bookshelf when I noticed something I hadn't before. A thin leather-bound journal tucked behind the photo frame of my wedding day. I didn't remember placing it there. In fact, I hadn't touched that frame in years. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. On the cover, faintly embossed, with the initials CVD Clara Van Dorn. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it. The name that had haunted half my life. The woman I had hated without ever truly knowing. Opened it slowly. The pages smelled of lavender and thyme. Inside was a single folded letter, addressed to me, to Mrs. Ruth Whitmore. If this reaches you, then my heart has finally given up its fight. There are things you deserve to know. Truths Henry would never tell you, because his love for you was too gentle for confession. When I married Henry, I knew he didn't love me. I saw it in his eyes every time he said my name, the way he used to say yours. Careful, distant, as if afraid of breaking something sacred. He never spoke of you often, but he didn't have to. You lived in the way he refused to dance, in the way he wouldn't let me bake, because it reminded him of the smell of your bread. You lived in his silence. And Ruth, you should know, I never tried to erase you. I only tried to make peace with living beside your ghost. I stopped reading. My breath caught. It felt like Clara herself was in the room. Her perfume, her calmness, her quiet ache. I read on. I didn't marry him out of greed, though I know the world thought so. I married him because my father gave me no choice. He had ruined Henry's reputation. After learning he couldn't repay the debt, I was the only way to protect him. And you. I told Henry that if he didn't agree, your father would be ruined publicly, your name dragged through mud, and everything you loved taken away. So he chose you. Even when he walked away from you, he was choosing you. The words blurred through my tears. All this time, I thought Clara had stolen him. But the truth was far more tragic. She had saved him. He never forgave me for forcing his hand, but I didn't blame him. I never wanted to own him, Ruth. I only wanted to spare 2 innocent hearts from my father's cruelty. I kept his letters to you all these years, the ones he was too afraid to send. After he fell ill, I gave them back to him. He said he would deliver them when the time was right. When you read this, please know, Henry loved you till his last breath. And as for me, I hope you can forgive the woman who stood between you. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. With quiet regret, Clara Van Dorn. I pressed the letter to my chest, the paper warm from my hands. For a long time, I just sat there in silence. The clock ticked. The wind hummed against the window, and my heart finally understood. He hadn't left me for love. He had left me for mercy. And she, the woman I had blamed for my years of loneliness, had carried her own pain in silence, just as I had carried mine. That evening, I lit 3 candles on the windowsill. One for him, one for her, and one for the girl I used to be. I sat in my armchair, the letter resting beside me, and watched the candles flicker. The house felt alive again, not haunted by the past, but filled with peace. I whispered softly, "I forgive you, Clara, and thank you for loving him enough to let me hate you." And for the first time, I realized that forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a slow unfolding, a quiet surrender to the truth that everyone carries their own pain, their own reasons. The next day, Margaret returned. She looked different this time, lighter, as if something in her had shifted too. "I found one more thing," she said, handing me a small silver locket. It was my mother's. She said it belonged to you. I opened it, and my breath caught. Inside was a tiny black and white photograph. Me and Henry, taken at the bakery on the day he first told me he loved me. I had thought that photo lost decades ago. "How did she get this?" I asked softly. She said your father sent it to her once, with a note that read, "She's my daughter, and she's worth saving." I closed my eyes. The room tilted slightly. The pieces fit together at last. My father, Henry, Clara, all of them tangled in one quiet act of love and sacrifice. Margaret smiled gently. "She wanted you to have it, Mrs. Whitmore. She said she owed you her piece too." I touched her hand. "You've done more for me than you know, child. You've given me back my story." When she left, I placed the locket beside the letters and whispered, "Now I know, Henry. Now I understand." That night, the rain returned, soft, steady, like a lullaby. I sat by the fire, my cup of tea warm in my hands, and spoke aloud, as if they could both hear me. "You see, my dears, love doesn't vanish when we make mistakes. It only hides behind them, waiting for courage to bring it back." I smiled then, really smiled, because even though life had broken all 3 of us, somehow, love had stitched us together again at the end. Oh, my dear, before I continue, if this story has touched your heart even a little, do subscribe and stay with me. Every time you listen, you keep these memories alive, and that truly means the world to me. Tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who never asked for it? Because sometimes, forgiveness is how we love ourselves enough to let go. It's strange, my dear, how peace doesn't come with fireworks. It slips in quietly, like sunlight sneaking through old curtains after years of darkness. After reading Clara's letter, I felt something inside me change. A kind of stillness I hadn't known in decades. For years, my heart had been a battlefield between love and resentment. But that morning, when I looked at the rain-soaked garden through my kitchen window, it no longer looked like a place of memories. It looked like home again. I began baking. Once more. Just simple things. Lemon bread, cinnamon rolls. The kind Henry used to tease me about for using too much butter. The scent filled the house like laughter that had been waiting too long to return, and every time I kneaded the dough, I found myself whispering his name, not in pain, but in prayer. One evening, as I was tidying the attic, I found something I hadn't seen in years. An old wooden box with a brass lock, its surface scratched and worn. It was Henry's. He used to keep his poetry drafts in it. Little verses he never showed anyone. He'd say, "They're not good enough, Ruth. I'm better at fixing doors than fixing words." But I always believed he had the soul of a poet. He just didn't believe in his own softness. The key was still tied to a ribbon, tucked beneath one of my old shawls. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. Inside were dozens of folded papers, yellowed with time. Most were unfinished poems, a few receipts, and at the very bottom, a small envelope, sealed with wax. It was addressed simply, "For Ruth, when the time feels right." My heart stilled. I broke the seal, the wax crumbling like old dust. Inside was a letter, his handwriting, unmistakable. "My dearest Ruth, if you are reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. Perhaps I thought you'd never want to hear from me again. Or perhaps I was too much a coward to face what I had done. There wasn't a single day, my love, that I didn't wish I'd chosen differently. But I didn't have that choice. I was ruined. And your father, proud as he was, would never let you marry a man with debts tied to his name. Clara saved us both from disgrace. I thought if I walked away, you'd still have your life, your name, your dignity, your bakery. I believed I was protecting you, but in trying to protect you, I broke you. I tried to build a life beside Clara. But a man can't live beside goodness when his soul is still kneeling at the feet of his past. She was kind, too kind, and she bore my silence like a saint. I loved her for her mercy, but I only ever belonged to you. When I grew ill, she told me to find you. She said love doesn't die with distance, only with dishonesty. I wanted to see you one last time, to tell you everything. But time betrayed me. If you ever forgive me, Ruth, light a candle by the window. I'll find my way home, even from beyond." My hands were shaking so violently that I almost dropped the letter, the candle by the window, the very one I had lit the night I read Clara's letter. Without knowing, I had already answered him. I looked toward that same window. The rain had stopped, and a faint glow of moonlight touched the old curtains. And for the briefest moment, I swear to you, my dear, I saw the shape of him, standing in the garden, just beyond the roses we planted together, his head bowed, his face gentle, as if the years had folded, and love had found its way home at last. I must have fallen asleep there by the window, because when I woke, the candle had burned down to nothing but wax and smoke. Yet I felt no fear, no ache, only a strange warmth inside my chest. It was as if the ghosts of my past had finally gone to rest. The days that followed were soft. I began writing again, not poetry or stories, but letters. To him, to Clara, to the girl I once was. Sometimes I'd talk aloud, as if they were sitting right beside me, listening with quiet smiles. You might think it sounds lonely, my dear, but it isn't. It's like learning to live again, only this time, without expecting anyone to stay. Because some loves aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to change us, to carve wisdom where heartbreak once lived. Oh, before I go on, if you're still here with me, listening to an old woman's tale, don't forget to stay till the end, will you? And if this story has touched even a corner of your heart, do subscribe, my dear. It keeps this old voice alive, and I'd love to know your story too. Now, shall I tell you what happened the day the letter was found by someone else? Because, as fate would have it, that letter, the one Henry wrote, wasn't meant for me alone. It carried one last secret, and it was waiting to be discovered. The morning after I read Henry's letter, I felt as though my heart had aged backward by decades. I made tea, open the windows, and let the wind carry the scent of rain and bread through every room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for answers, for apologies, for ghosts. I felt free. But peace, my dear, is never the end of a story. Sometimes it's the beginning of one you never knew existed. That afternoon, I heard the sound of footsteps outside. When I opened the door, it was Margaret again. Her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed, as though she hadn't slept. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said softly, clutching something in her hand. "I found this in one of my mother's old jewelry boxes. I think it's yours." She held out a small folded piece of paper, the edges frayed. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Henry's, but it wasn't the letter I had read. It was dated a week later. I felt my knees weaken as I invited her inside. We sat by the fire, the air thick with unspoken things. I opened the note slowly, my fingers trembling like the wings of a frightened bird. "My dear Ruth, if Clara has given you my letter, then there's one more truth I need to leave behind. Not just for you, but for the child who deserves to know where she truly comes from. You see, before I left that night, you told me you were with child. You said it softly, through tears, afraid I'd vanish anyway. And I did, but not because I wanted to. I thought keeping distance would protect you both. I sent money when I could, under Clara's name, so no one would suspect. Your father's pride would have destroyed you had he known, but when the war came, everything scattered, and I lost the means to find you again. If you ever read this, and if the child still lives, tell her I loved her even before I knew her. Tell her she was born from love, not from loss." I froze. The paper fell from my hands. Margaret leaned forward, confused. "Mrs. Whitmore, what does it mean?" I stared at her. Her brown eyes, the curve of her jaw, that faint dimple when she frowned. I had seen those eyes before, in a man who had once held my face beneath the soft light of an English sunset. My breath caught. "Margaret," I whispered. "How old are you?" 39, she replied, startled. "And your mother?" "Clara. When did she pass?" 2 years ago." The room tilted. I held the armrest to steady myself. "Your mother," I said slowly. "Did she ever tell you where she met your father?" She shook her head. "She said he was a kind man she met through family friends. But she never spoke much about him." I closed my eyes, and the world seemed to still. It all made sense now. The kindness in Margaret's voice, the way she had been drawn to me, the gentle familiarity in her presence. Henry's words echoed in my mind. Tell her she was born from love, not from loss. My heart swelled and broke all at once. I reached for her hand, tears sliding down my cheeks. "My dear child," I said softly, "I think you might be my granddaughter." She blinked, confused, almost laughing through disbelief. "What? No, that can't be." But I showed her the letters, one by one. Henry's handwriting, Clara's confession, my own memories written in the folds of time. The truth settled between us, like light through old glass. Fragile but undeniable. Margaret wept then, not loudly, but with quiet, shaking breaths, as if her soul had finally found the missing piece. It had never known it was missing. She knelt by my chair, her hands clutching mine. "All my life, I wondered why I felt so connected to this house, to you," she whispered. "I thought it was just kindness, but it was something deeper, wasn't it?" I brushed her hair back, my tears falling into hers. "It was blood. Calling to blood, my dear. Love finding its way home through generations." That night, we sat together by the fire. She told me about her mother, how Clara never remarried, how she spoke of love as something sacred, but unfinished, She was lonely, Margaret said, but she always smiled when she baked. She used to hum an old tune. She said it reminded her of someone she'd once known. I laughed through tears. It was Henry's favourite tune, Moonlight on the River. He used to hum it whenever he was nervous. We both smiled then, the kind of smile that only two souls connected by fate can share. Outside, the wind whispered through the ivy on the walls, and the candles flickered like little souls dancing in peace. I looked at Margaret, my granddaughter, and felt an ache of gratitude so deep it was almost unbearable. The past had taken so much from me, but it had given her back. Later that night, after she left, I wrote in my diary, "Love doesn't end with heartbreak. It continues through those who were born from it." I thought Henry and I were finished long ago, but now I see we were never meant to end. We were meant to become a story that life itself kept retelling until it found its way home. I placed Henry's letters, Clara's confession, and Margaret's picture together in the wooden box. Then I locked it, not out of secrecy, but out of peace. I whispered softly, "It's done now, Henry. We're all home." And for the first time, the silence in this house didn't feel empty. It felt blessed. Oh, my dear, if you're still listening, thank you. If this story has found a place in your heart, don't forget to stay with me till the very end and tell me, have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew? I'd love to hear it, because sometimes the past doesn't haunt us to hurt us. It returns to heal what time forgot. Do you know, my dear, there's something extraordinary about a house that's held too many memories. It becomes more than wood and stone. It breathes. It listens. It forgives. After that night, the house finally began to breathe again. The doors that once creaked mournfully now opened with ease. The air, once heavy with sorrow, carried the faint sweetness of lavender and old paper. And every morning, as the sun reached through the ivy-covered windows, it painted gold over everything that had once been grey. It was as though the house itself had heard the truth and sighed with relief. Margaret began visiting often. Sometimes she'd bring pastries, sometimes wildflowers from her garden. Other times, she'd come just to sit beside me, both of us sipping tea in silence as the clock ticked softly between us. She called me Gran one morning, quite naturally, without hesitation. It was the smallest word, yet it filled every empty corner of my heart. I smiled through tears. "Gran," I whispered to myself when she left that day. I never thought I'd hear that again. It had been so long since someone said it with love. Not out of habit, but out of belonging. One afternoon, as autumn began to whisper through the leaves, we decided to clean the west attic, a place I hadn't dared enter in over 40 years. It was where Henry used to work on his carpentry, back when he was full of plans and promises. The room smelled of sawdust, rust, and time. Dust motes floated through the air like faded stars. We worked in silence, occasionally finding small trinkets, old tools, a cracked clock, a drawer full of sketches of furniture he never built. Then, beneath a stack of wooden boards, Margaret found something strange, a narrow wooden panel, oddly newer than the rest of the wall. "Gran," she said, tapping it lightly. "This part sounds hollow." I felt my chest tighten. "Henry was always hiding things in his work," I murmured. "He said a good craftsman leaves a secret in everything he builds, just to be remembered." We fetched a small hammer and carefully loosened the panel. Behind it was a small compartment lined with faded red velvet. Inside lay a tin box, unmarked, dusty, but still intact. Margaret handed it to me, her eyes wide. "Do you think?" I nodded, my throat dry. "Open it." She did. and inside were dozens of photographs, some of me and Henry, others I'd never seen before. But one, right on top, made me gasp. It was a photograph of me, sitting by the bakery window, smiling as sunlight touched my hair. I hadn't even known it was taken. On the back, in Henry's handwriting, were 4 words. For when she smiles again, my eyes burned with tears. Margaret whispered, "He took these for you?" I nodded, tracing the faded ink. He must have hidden them before he left. Or maybe after he returned once. I looked around the attic. The dust, the scent, the quiet hum of memory. I think he came back here once. Long after we thought he was gone, I said softly, to make sure I was okay. We spent hours looking through the photos. There were sketches of the bakery, my old recipes rewritten in his hand, and one final note tucked at the bottom, to the woman who taught me love, to the house that held it, and to the daughter who will one day find it. This is my apology, turned into memory. Henry. I pressed the paper to my heart. It was as though he'd been guiding us both, me and Margaret, through every twist of fate, leaving breadcrumbs of love through time. Later that evening, Margaret said something that struck me deeply. "Gran," she said softly, "you know what I think. I think love like yours and Henry's. It doesn't die. It just hides in the walls until someone's ready to hear it again." I smiled, my hand resting over hers. "Then I'm glad we listened, my dear, because it's been whispering for far too long." We sat there in the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by the relics of a love that had once been broken, but now, finally, was whole again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of that photograph. For, when she smiles again, I realized something profound. For years, I thought forgiveness meant letting go. But no, it means remembering without pain. It means smiling at the memory instead of mourning it. So I placed the photograph on my bedside table, right beside Clara's letter. And for the first time in decades, I fell asleep smiling. Oh, my dear, before we go further, if this story has found its way into your heart, do stay with me till the end. And tell me, have you ever found something from your past that changed the way you saw your life? Sometimes the smallest discovery can rewrite everything we thought was lost. A week after we found Henry's photographs, the air around the house began to change again. It wasn't sorrowful anymore. It was gentle, like the breath of something that had been waiting to be set free. The ivy around the windows had started to bloom again, even though the season had long passed. Margaret said it was coincidence, but I've lived long enough to know when something isn't coincidence. It was memory blooming. One Sunday morning, we decided to hold a small gathering. Nothing formal, just a quiet memorial for Henry and Clara. No church bells, no grand speeches, just us, the firelight and the whispers of the past. We placed their photographs side by side on the old mantel. Henry with his gentle smile, Clara with her calm, distant eyes. Two souls who had carried the same love in different ways. Margaret lit 2 candles. I lit a third, one for him, one for her, and one for forgiveness. The flame flickered softly, casting long shadows across the room. Shadows that felt like the ghosts of laughter and love that once lived here. "I think they'd be proud of us," Margaret said quietly. I smiled. "I think they're here, my dear." After the memorial, as we cleared the table, Margaret ran her fingers across the edge of the mantel and frowned. "Gran, did you ever notice this engraving?" I looked closer. Beneath the varnish and dust, there were faint markings. Letters carved into the wood. Long ago, we brushed away the grime and the message slowly revealed itself. It read, "Love returns when it is remembered." The words hit me like a whisper straight from the grave. Henry then, handwriting. I would have known it anywhere. He must have carved it years ago, maybe during one of those quiet days when I wasn't home. A secret he left behind, waiting for me to find. Not when I was grieving, but when I was ready to remember with love. Margaret smiled through her tears. He really did wait for you, didn't he? I nodded, voice trembling. He waited for me to stop being angry, to stop hurting, and I think he waited for you too, to carry it forward. That night, I couldn't bear to go to bed. I stayed by the fire long after Margaret had gone home, watching the flames dance over those carved words. And in the quiet, I began to speak. Not to anyone in the room, but to the air that had once known their voices. "Henry," I whispered. "We made such a mess of love, didn't we? But even in all that hurt, it never died. You found a way back to me. Even after time and distance and death, you found me." I closed my eyes and I could almost hear his voice again. Soft, low, familiar, for when she smiles again. And I did smile, not out of sadness, not out of longing, but out of gratitude. Because I realized that even though Henry had been gone for decades, love never really left this house. It had been here all along, in the creaking floors, in the scent of cinnamon, in the laughter that once echoed through these halls. When morning came, the first sunlight broke through the window, landing directly on the words he'd carved. "Love returns when it is remembered." The golden light made the letters glow like a blessing. I whispered softly, and I remember. Later that day, Margaret and I buried the letters and photographs beneath the old oak tree in the garden, the same tree Henry had planted the year we fell in love. The earth was soft, and the wind hummed gently through the leaves. Margaret placed the box in the ground, her voice shaking slightly. "Gran, are you sure you want to bury them?" "Yes," I said with a smile. "They've done their part. They've carried pain, truth, and love across time. Now they deserve to rest." We covered the box with soil, and I pressed my palm against the earth. "I forgive you, Henry," I whispered. "And I thank you, Clara." Then Margaret added, softly, "And I thank you, both of you, for giving me her." Her words broke something open inside me. Something fragile. Something beautiful. Because in that moment, I realized the story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about inheritance. Not the kind you hold in your hands, but the kind that lives in your heart. That night, I sat by my window, the same window where I'd once lit a candle for Henry. Now, I lit it again, but this time, not for the dead, for the living, for the daughter I'd never held, for the granddaughter who found her way home, and for every broken heart that still dares to believe that love, no matter how late it arrives, always returns, my dear, before I rest tonight. If this story has found its way into your heart, don't forget to stay with me till the very end. And tell me, have you ever felt someone's love long after they were gone? Because sometimes, that's how you know it was real. It keeps finding you, even in silence. It's strange how peaceful this house feels now. For years, its walls carried whispers of regret, echoes of what was never said. But lately, all I hear are lullabies. Margaret visits often. She brings me flowers from her garden, laughter from her daughter, and sometimes silence. But it's the kind of silence that doesn't ache anymore. It soothes. We sit by the fire, just like I once did with Henry. Though now it's not love lost that fills the air. It's love fulfilled. The kind that doesn't demand, doesn't hurt, doesn't fade. It simply is. One evening, as the rain gently tapped against the window, Margaret asked me, Gran, do you ever wish things had turned out differently? I thought about that for a long time. I thought of Henry's laughter in the garden, the way his hands smelled of earth and cedar. I thought of Clara, writing her letters in secret, carrying her love like a quiet burden. And I thought of myself, young, proud, heartbroken, and angry at the world for taking what I thought was mine. I smiled softly. No, darling, if I changed anything, I might have lost everything that came after. Even you. She reached out and held my hand. You're the bravest woman I've ever known. I chuckled. Oh, I'm not brave, dear. I just lived long enough to understand that pain is a form of love too. It's love with no place to go, and forgiveness is how you finally give it one. She didn't say anything, but her eyes glistened. Sometimes silence says what words can't. When she left that night, I stayed by the fire again. The candles had burned low, their wax pooling, like small lakes of memory. I picked up my old journal, the one I had stopped writing in decades ago, and began to write, not about sorrow, not about loss, but about peace. If love leaves, let it go softly, for if it was true, it will find its way back, not as fire, but as light. I signed my name at the bottom, Ruth Whitmore, and felt something release inside me. It was as though I had finally put a full stop at the end of a lifelong sentence. The next morning, I went out to the garden. The air smelled of wet earth and lilac. The old oak tree stood proud, leaves trembling under the wind. Guarding thee, love and secrets buried beneath it. I whispered, "Rest well, my darlings. We've done what we were meant to do." A single leaf broke free and drifted down to my hand, as if to say, "We heard you." That night, I dreamt of Henry. He stood at the gate of the old house, younger than I remembered, wearing that same soft smile that once melted my anger. Behind him stood Clara, serene and glowing, her eyes filled with understanding, not envy. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Henry simply reached for my hand, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. I smiled and whispered, "It's all right now. You can rest." He nodded, and the dream faded like the last light of evening. When I woke, my pillow was wet with tears, but my heart was lighter than it had been in years. Now I sit here by the window, my hands trembling slightly as I write this final page. The candle flickers beside me, its flame small but steady, just like me. If someone finds this journal after I'm gone, I hope they understand. This isn't a story of betrayal. It's a story of remembering and letting go, because love, even when it breaks you, always teaches you how to heal. And if you're listening to my voice right now, please remember this, my dear. Forgive, even if they never say sorry. Love, even if it hurts. And when you finally make peace with your past, you'll find that it's been waiting for you, quietly, all along. I've often wondered, my dear, why hearts break the way they do. Why love, so beautiful in its beginning, ends like a slow sunset, taking its light with it, leaving you to learn how to see in the dark. But I think I finally understand now. The breaking isn't the end. It's the space where the light gets in. For years I thought Henry's leaving had stolen my happiness. But what it really did was give me time. Time to grow roots in silence. Time to learn who I was without someone else's shadow. Time to see that peace doesn't come when life is perfect. It comes when you stop needing it to be. I sometimes imagine him walking through that gate again. Older now, maybe slower. The weight of choices in his eyes. I imagine him looking at me, perhaps surprised that I'm still here. Not as the woman he left behind, but as the one who built a life from what was left. And if that day ever comes, I won't turn away. I won't cry. I'll pour him a cup of tea, the same way I always used to. We'll sit by the window in silence, watching the rain blur the world outside. And I'll say, it's all right, Henry. We both loved, and we both learned. That's enough, because it is. It really is. You know, dear, life has a strange way of giving us what we need, not what we want. Sometimes losing someone isn't the tragedy we think it is. It's the universe clearing space for us to meet ourselves again. And oh, what a gift that is. If this story has touched your heart even a little, my dear, do subscribe and stay with me through the next one. There are so many pieces of my heart still left to tell, and perhaps, somewhere in them, you'll find a piece of your own too. Tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who broke your heart? I'd love to hear your story, wherever you are. Sometimes I sit here, by this same window, and I think about all the places my voice travels to. America, where someone listens while they make their morning tea. Canada, where another watches the snow fall outside their window. Australia, where it's already tomorrow and they're ready for a new day. And maybe, just maybe, someone, somewhere, is hearing my story at the exact moment they needed it most. If that someone is you, then my story was never in vain. Love doesn't always stay where you left it, but peace. Peace always finds its way home. And that, my dear, is the greatest truth I've learned in this long, beautiful life. If you stayed with me till the end, my dear, thank you. Tell me the time and country you're watching from in the comments. It warms my old heart, knowing where my stories travel. Good night, my dear. And remember, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without the pain.